Hi, everyone, and welcome to Jason's Amazing Race Recap 37, episode number 11. On this episode, I'll review the Amazing Race Season 37, episode 11, and let's find out who got eliminated in fourth place. There's only going to be 3 teams left for the finale, so let's find out who they are. I'm your host, Jason Mogul. On the last episode, we saw Brett and Mark get eliminated in 5th place. They were the last ones to arrive at the Council of Europe, the last ones at the head-to-head jousting event, and had troubles making their stork nest at For the Birds detour. They also struggled at navigation, and in the end, they just couldn't catch up to the others. Now, on episode 11, it was Carson and Jack who got to leave the pit stop first at 1:52 a.m., and learned they were headed to Porto, Portugal. Alyssa and Josiah were 15 minutes behind them, with Jonathan and Anna and Han and Holden leaving within 35 minutes of the leaders. As was the case with several legs this season, all teams went to the same travel agency and all got on the same flight to Portugal. Again, all teams were equalized at the start of this leg, and it would be a foot race from the plane to the next clue box. On the way to the airport, the teams discussed their amazement that they had made it this far and that they have to run a good leg to make it to the final 3. Even Jonathan and Anna were upbeat and smiling at the prospect of winning it all. Once teams arrived in Portugal, their clue told them they had to drive to Granjau area of the Douro Valley and they had to self-navigate and drive their own car. Based on what I saw on a map, it was about 30 miles from the airport. In another twist this season, teams would select, at random, a set of car keys from a roulette wheel located in a parking garage in the Porto airport. They called it Valet Roulette. There would be 3 cars with manual transmissions and 2 cars with automatics. With 4 teams left, there would be a car not used. Phil talked about how this could be a game changer and could affect the outcome of the race. But when teams had to drive stick-shift cars in earlier legs, the only real issue they had was finding reverse gear, specifically Brett and Mark and Han and Holden. Once they figured that out, no team really had any issues driving a manual, although Jack is not skilled at stick-shift, but Carson is. And Brett and Mark are no longer racing, so there's no drama there. Carson and Jack found the roulette wheel first, and by chance, they got an automatic. Potential trouble averted for them. Jonathan and Anna were second with a manual, but they said they have a manual car at home, so no issues there. Alyssa and Josiah got an automatic, easy enough, and Han and Holden ended up with a manual transmission, but they've proven they can drive a manual gearbox. This valet roulette twist turned out to be much ado about nothing in my opinion. It may have caused more drama if different teams were still in the race, but it turned out not to be as big a deal as Phil hyped it up to be. Personally, I would have liked to have seen more teams struggle with a stick shift. It's entertaining to see teams burn up clutches and grind the gears, but savvy teams now know that they need to be prepped to face manual transmissions during the race after 36 seasons. On the way, Han said they were ready to be stallions, ditching the cockroach reference from the last leg. All teams were provided maps, but some still had trouble navigating. Jonathan struggled in the back seat as the navigator, taking the long scenic route. Han and Holden and Alyssa and Josiah also had some difficulties. Carson and Jack, however, didn't seem to have any trouble. They arrived at the clue box first and tore open their clue. It directed them to cross a river by paddling an inflatable boat and then roll 2 wine barrels up a long path to a wine house where they would get their next clue. I noted that there were several things that could trip up racers with this task. First, it was physically hard and looked to be back-breaking work. And each team had to use barrels that were marked the same. If they grabbed 2 different barrels and pushed them all the way up, I could just see that they had to go back and do it all over again with matching barrels. And third, they had to roll the barrels. They couldn't just carry them like Anthony and Bates did in Season 22. Also, no carts or wheelbarrows were allowed. Han and Holden arrived next to begin paddling across the river. Jack was taxed by the barrel roll, but he and Carson completed it first and got their next clue. It told them to drive to a castle about 60 miles away by my estimate. They left just as Han and Holden began rolling their barrels. Meanwhile, Alyssa and Josiah showed up and began paddling, but not without some difficulty. Josiah was a little agitated by their lack of teamwork, a rarity for him. But Alyssa wasn't having it and pushed back with equal energy. They passed Carson and Jack as they paddled back to the car. Jonathan and Anna were having serious issues with navigation. He was unsure of which direction to go, and his communication with Anna was vague and non-committal. One roundabout gave them particular trouble. It seemed the more time passed, Jonathan sunk deeper into apathy. His comment was, "This is a crappy final leg." You could just see him giving up. Both Han and Holden and Alyssa and Josiah completed the barrel roll, while Jonathan and Anna were still lost. Carson and Jack arrived at the castle and were excited the task was medieval. It was a roadblock that required one team member to dress in a suit of armor, sit on a wooden horse, and shoot arrows at 3 moving targets. They had 7 tries, and if they failed, they had to start over and try again. Alyssa and Josiah arrived at the castle shortly after Carson and Jack, and just a few minutes later, Han and Holden arrived. Several locals were active with sword play in the background, and Josiah told them, "Calm down, guys. We can talk it out." That was pretty good. After playing rock, paper, scissors to decide who would do the roadblock, Carson performed the task, as did Alyssa and Holden. Holden came out of the castle looking like the Pillsbury Doughboy. He had so much padding on, he could barely see. Carson completed the task after just one attempt and left for another long drive to find a Porto train station and then take the train to a specific stop and then find a guy with ceramic tiles. Alyssa finished next after 4 attempts and Holden next after 2 attempts. They all left the castle before Jonathan and Anna showed up. They finally made it, but Jonathan couldn't bring himself to enjoy the moment, being so far behind. Anna, on the other hand, seized the day. However, she did say the task looked harder than it looks. Carson and Jack made it to the train station first, with Han and Holden right on their heels. They needed to take the train to the next stop. Carson and Jack got tickets to a train leaving in just minutes, hoping it left before Han and Holden boarded. But Han and Holden were able to just get on in time. Meanwhile, Alyssa and Josiah's car was hit in the rear by another as they were looking for a parking spot at the train station. They had to stop and assess the damage. None was observed and the other driver was satisfied, so they moved on. But they lost time, and they missed the marked parking and had to go around a loop again to try yet again. Jonathan completed the arrow roadblock in 2 attempts, and they left for the train station. Carson and Jack and Han and Holden found their tile man and received a tile with the name of a wine house on the back. Off they went to find the wine house. Alyssa and Josiah got lost and took some time to get to the station, but they made it and got their tickets. But somehow, Jonathan and Anna caught up and they arrived at the train station. Alyssa and Josiah waited on the platform, hoping to get on the next train before Jonathan and Anna did. But the train was late. It gave an arguing Jonathan and Anna time to catch the same train. Oh, the two had a tiff about Anna cutting in line in front of Jonathan. Alyssa was so disappointed that they had given up the long lead they had on the bickering couple, you could see it on her face, and the blurred out words coming out of her mouth. I mean, I could feel it. I want Alyssa and Josiah to make it to the top 3, and it looked like that would happen earlier in the leg. But now, with both teams on the same train, headed to the last task of the leg, the outcome was uncertain. I could see a recurrence of the last-ditch attempt by Jeff and Pops and Nick and Mike to avoid elimination on a previous leg. 2 teams on the same train, getting off at the same time, and the last to finish the task would be eliminated in 4th place. A rotten, stinking place to finish the amazing race. Once at the wine house, teams were given 81 tiles that were a puzzle. The task was to make an image with the tiles that showed the location of the pit stop. It would be an arrangement of 9 tiles high by 9 tiles wide. The image was of ships on a river with buildings and a bridge in the background. They had to use adhesive to stick them to a wall. Carson and Jack worked quickly and completed it first. Off they went to find Phil. Once they got off the train, Alyssa and Josiah ran with energy and purpose to find the wine house. On the other hand, Anna had to prod Jonathan along, who just nonchalantly kind of shuffled his way along. Alyssa and Josiah had a small lead when they started the tile task, but again, somehow, Jonathan and Anna caught up and actually looked like they were going to finish their mosaic first. At this point, Han and Holden finished second, and they also left to find Phil. At the pit stop, Carson and Jack arrived first, and Han and Holden were second, and we knew at this point those two teams would be in the finale. But who was going to be third? It could go either way. Jonathan and Anna, by some unforeseen force, seemed to be pulling away to beat Alyssa and Josiah, who earlier that day had a commanding lead over them. Alyssa and Josiah arranged their image on a table, but failed twice to get it approved. Jonathan and Anna received approval on their first attempt. Both teams worked feverishly to finish. But just as Jonathan and Anna were nearing completion of adhering their tiles to the wall, Jonathan dropped and broke 1, maybe even 2 tiles as they hit the ground. That is not good, was his reaction. And we, as the audience, don't know what that means. Do they just get replacements? Do they have to search through another 81 tiles to find the right ones? Or do they have to start all over again with a fresh stack of 81? Then we see to be continued as episode 11 concludes. Oh, so after waiting a week and watching episode 11 with the sole purpose of seeing who will be in the final 3, we still don't know. Great cliffhanger, Amazing Race people. Seriously. And during this leg, Carson and Jack ran another good leg, aided by an automatic transmission at the valet roulette wheel, which meant Carson navigated, which meant they had a good day navigating. And good performances at the arrow roadblock and at the mosaic tile propelled them to first. Han and Holden, despite some navigation issues, also had a good day. But navigation and communication problems for Alyssa and Josiah and Jonathan and Anna left them in a tight race not to be eliminated right before the finale. And remember my theory that Han and Holden would be eliminated this leg because they carried a backpack each, while the other teams only had 1 backpack between them? Well, that proved to be bogus. Okay, folks, just one more episode to go this season, where we will not only find out who the third team is in the finale, but we will also learn who takes home the $1 million. That's all for today. Thanks for listening, and join me one more time for the finale, and I'll discuss and provide insight on what happens as the teams head back to the U.S. See you then.